I'm Debbie Huntsman. I'm the president of the National Women's Sailing Association, and this is the She Sailor Sea Story. NWSA, the National Women's Sailing Association, we create safe waters for women and girls to thrive in sailing.
Hello, I'm Mo Morrow, and thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm super excited to share it with you. Thank you to the National Women's Sailing Association for hosting this and inviting me and creating this amazing platform to grow community of women and sailors. So awesome. Okay. Here's my story. I sailed into the Sea of Cortez a few weeks before my 28th birthday. Starting in Southern California, I had sailed my 30-foot sloop 3,000 miles thus far with the support and help from friends, family, and strangers. I did not grow up sailing. In fact, I was learning a lot on the spot. I never took a class or had formal instruction, but 3 years prior, I bought a sailboat for $2,000 and lived aboard. People said I was brave, but I would have called it desperate. I was desperate to find out if there was more to me than what the world had put in my mind and what I believed. There was a calling, a pull, as if my inner being was yearning to connect, reconnect with something beyond itself. Most of what I knew about sailing was from watching friends and messing up a whole lot. I had my fair share of tacking on accident and misjudging approaches to the dock. But with persistence, I learned my boat. I learned when it needed to be reefed and when it needed full sails. I learned all of its systems from the head to the engine. Once I reached this point, my boat became an extension of me, or perhaps I became an extension of the boat. I'm still not sure who controls who, but regardless, my boat was my home, and by the time I got into the Sea of Cortez, I had changed. I had changed from a person with a boat into a sailor, from a worrier to a proactive preparer, from a lonely seeker of independence into a member of a global community, connected with the salt air, the electricity of the ocean's creatures, the roar of the wind. I flowed through the sea as much as the sea flowed through me. The movement of the boat through the water became a mantra. The celestial bodies were my gods, the birds my gurus, and it was all because I had a boat that moved with the wind. I started the journey seeking independence, a journey to prove I could do it alone, to show myself that I didn't need to rely on anybody. I was to learn that this narrative that I thought was so important to proving my worth and my value was yet another idea that clouded my growth. But I needed to be alone to learn this lesson. Alone on my sailboat in the middle of the Sea of Cortez. How can one not feel alone and lonely? I admit, days at sea without another face turned me into a social butterfly in a boat-filled anchorage. But once I got into the sea, its magic enveloped me, and my time cruising became a spiritual journey. I became proud of myself for the first time in my life, and I felt free. But it wasn't always like this. For a long time, I had something that made my throat close up, that feeling that comes when holding back tears, that deep thud in the chest full of nerves. I was a clogged pipe ready to burst. It felt like I had been fighting against everything for the past decade. Societal norms, rules, authorities, and now I was fighting against nature, against this darn jib sheet caught under the bow of the boat. How did it get there? I was fighting with my own mind. And it wasn't until I took the challenge to be undistractedly present in the current moment again and again with myself, with nowhere to run to, that I found my power and learned another way to be me. I learned from my sailboat to take the path of least resistance and do whatever I could to influence flow. And did I let it flow? It started with immense happiness. I was standing on the bow as the boat and I sailed at a gentle 4 knots on a beam reach. The sun was high, the wind was warm, and the boat through the water made a soothing ch ch sound. I felt proud of myself. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself be happy. I let myself feel. I had cried full of happiness because I felt like I escaped the box of societal pressures that could compress a soul more than the pressure of the deep ocean. I was alone in the middle of the sea, more connected to the world than I had ever felt before in my life. On a different day, while the sun was setting, I felt sad, so I cried. No one was there to console me, to stop me, so I kept going until I filled the cockpit with tears, and I watched them roll through the scuppers to mix with the sea. I sucked in air in hurried gasps, but eventually, naturally, it faded. It stopped. I had cried out all the sadness I felt. My breath softened and became deeper. Other times I felt angry, and I noticed it was mostly when I was tired or sleep deprived. So I groaned and I roared until I didn't feel like I needed to anymore. And then one day I sang. I had roared and cried that lump in my throat right on out. Enough. Enough for a song to come through. And after I sang, I sat in silence, in harmony with everything. Have you ever heard someone on land say a quote referencing a ship, like, "Take the helm on this one," or "She is very even-keeled"? Our language is filled with ship metaphors, and I have concluded it's because everything there is to learn about life can be done on a sailboat. I learned about myself through learning about my sailboat. I learned what would happen under too much stress, how little effort was needed to steer when the sails were trimmed correctly, how care and routine maintenance kept the boat in good working order, and how neglect led to broken bits or clogged parts. But what really set the stage for growing up was how I was moving through the world. The wind, this invisible force, only perceptible by that which it comes into contact with, is the breath of life to the sailboat. Wind, my meditative mirror, a growing up story, finding home in my body story, finding my strength from living in a society of scarcity to a life of abundance. Everything around me became my teacher or inspiration. But without the wind, I would not be a sailor. I learned to control my emotions instead of stuffing them in a small space within me. I learned how to do this with the air element as my guide. I learned that I could not control the wind, but I could control the sails. When there was a lot of wind overpowering the boat, making steering difficult, I could adjust sail area. Likewise, I could not control the happenings of the world that made me nervous, angry, or sad, but I could control my breath to bring my body back to a comfortable place. I could not control the direction of the wind, but I could control the sail trim and our heading. I could not always control where or when I would be required to face challenges, but I could regulate my heart and my focus by directing my breath to different areas of my body. I became a part of the sea, and I found the power that rests inside me And it's all because I had a boat that moved with the wind. This voyage of mine, this learning experience, I would not have been able to do it without the support of friends, family, and strangers, everybody in my life who was rooting me on. So much gratitude, so much love. Thank you, thank you.